This is Harsh Rules. I'm Ben Harsh, and today we're going to learn to play Commands and Colors Samurai Battles. Commands and Colors Samurai Battles was released in 2021 by GMT Games and designed by Richard Borg. This game supports 2 players and each scenario takes about an hour to play. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to recognize the Harsh Rules Patreon supporters that help make content like this possible. If you'd like to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/harshrules to learn more. And once again, thank you for your support. To begin a game, open the scenario book to page 2. This page lists the game's 40 scenarios. We're going to begin with the first scenario, First Samurai Skirmish, on page 3. A scenario listing includes the following information: a diagram of the game board and the positions of each player's army, as well as terrain such as rivers, woods, and hills. The historical background section gives players context for the battle they're about to play. The battle notes section names each player's army, identifies their main leader, establishes each player's starting hand of cards, the number of honor and fortune tokens, and indicates the player that moves first. The victory section reveals the number of banners required to win the game, and there is a section for special rules unique to that scenario. Now that we understand the layout for a scenario, let's set up our first game. Commands and Colors game pieces represent various types of military units and their leaders. Each wooden block indicates the amount of health. Most units are comprised of 4 blocks, and leaders representing an individual a single block. In combat, a successful hit removes a block, and when all blocks are removed, the unit or leader is defeated. It's important to note that leaders are not units. They're their own game piece. Only one unit can occupy a single hex space. Leaders, on the other hand, are the only game piece that can enter or pass through a hex space occupied by a friendly unit. When a leader occupies the same space as a unit, it is considered attached to that unit and can provide significant benefits in battle. Now that we're more familiar with unit and leader blocks, let's set up the game. Following the setup diagram, place the terrain tiles as shown. Next, place the armies. The Red Samurai Army will set up their forces on the northern half of the board, and the Blue Army will set up their forces on the bottom half. Keep in mind, only one unit may occupy a hex, and only leaders may move into or out of hexes occupied by friendly units. Units have multiple blocks representing their health. All foot units and cavalry units are comprised of 4 blocks each. Leaders, on the other hand, are always represented by a single block. In Commands and Colors Samurai Battles, there are 3 types of leaders: foot leaders, cavalry leaders, and army commanders. The introductory scenario only deals with foot leaders and cavalry leaders. As I've shown on the screen, these single leader blocks may occupy hex spaces with other friendly units. Next, place 5 victory banners in each color within easy reach of both players. Victory banners are earned whenever the last block of a unit is eliminated or a leader is eliminated. In some scenarios, additional victory banners may be gained by capturing certain terrain hexes or other battlefield objectives. Victory banners are essentially this game's point system. Each scenario has its own required number of victory banners, and the first player to earn that number wins the game. Next, thoroughly shuffle the command card deck and the dragon card deck, and deal each player the number of cards allotted by the scenario. These cards become the player's starting hand. Each player will also receive honor and fortune tokens. Honor is a vitally important aspect of Japanese culture, especially during this time period. Honor is accumulated and spent with these tokens. Honorable actions, such as successful combat versus an equal or superior opponent, rewards tokens. Dishonorable actions, such as retreat, cost players tokens. These tokens can also be spent to play dragon cards that impact the player's armies in several ways. In this introductory scenario, each player begins with 5 honor and fortune tokens. Finally, make sure the game's battle dice are near the game board, as well as the remaining pool of honor and fortune tokens, and any reference cards you might need while playing. Now you're ready to begin playing the game. Next, let's learn more about the sequence of play. In Commands and Colors Samurai Battles, each player's turn is organized into 5 phases. In Phase 1, the player selects and plays a command card from their hand. Then, in Phase 2, following the command card's instructions, the player identifies their units that will receive these orders. An ordered unit may move and potentially conduct combat. After that, in Phase 3, the player may move any or none of their ordered units. Be aware though, once this phase ends, the player may not move units again during this turn. In Phase 4, the player then declares which of their ordered units will, if they're able to, conduct combat, and then resolves all those combat instances. And finally, in Phase 5, the player discards their used command card and draws another one from their deck. If the draw deck runs out of cards, shuffle the discards to form a new draw deck. Then the player has a choice. They may draw 1 dragon card or gain 2 honor and fortune tokens. In addition, if the active player did not play a dragon card during his turn, 1 dragon card may be discarded from his hand and 1 honor and fortune token can be collected instead. Be aware though, a dragon card drawn at the end of the player's turn cannot be discarded in the turn it was drawn. This will end the first player's turn, then the second player takes their turn following these 5 phases and so on. Players continue to take turns until one of them meets the victory conditions of the scenario and wins the game. Next, let's walk through each of these phases in greater detail. To understand card play, orders, and movement, first it's necessary to learn how the board functions. The battlefield game board is a grid, 12 hexes wide by 11 hexes deep. The battlefield is divided into 3 sections by 2 dotted lines, giving each player a left flank section, a center section, and a right flank section. Each side issues orders to their units and/or leaders by playing command cards from their hand. For example, this command card allows 2 units to be ordered in the left flank section, this one 2 in the center section, and this one 2 on the right flank section. Whenever a dotted line cuts through a hex, that hex is part of both its flank section and the center section. Therefore, units in these split hexes may participate in orders in either section. At the start of a player's turn, they will select 1 command card from their hand, place it face up in front of them, and read it aloud to their opponent. Next, following the card's instructions, they will announce which eligible units or leaders they choose to order. Only those units or leaders chosen to receive an order may move, battle, or take a special action. When a leader is in the same hex as a unit, it is considered attached to that unit. Leaders may move with that unit under the same order. However, if a player wants to detach a leader from a unit and move it into its own hex, it costs them 1 order. Next, let's learn more about orders that become available through the play of command cards. Command cards can be divided into 2 types: section cards and tactic cards. Section cards refer to orders that affect a specific number or type of units and leaders in certain sections of the game board, or a combination of units in different sections. Some section cards will allow a player to order units equal to command. Command refers to the number of command cards in the player's hand. Likewise, tactic cards allow ordered units to move and/or battle in ways not allowed in the basic rules. Tactic cards like First Strike allow a defender to turn the table on their opponent and attack first. Counterattack mirrors the last command card played. Serpent Command orders a group of units in adjacent linked contiguous hexes. Hold and Shoot enables ranged weapon units to fire twice. These are just a few examples that, if carefully played, can turn the tide of a battle. As you just saw, most command cards direct orders at specific sections of the game board and/or unit types. There are also command cards that utilize leaders. Leadership cards allow you to order a leader, and then cascade that order from that leader to any units attached to them, basically in the same hex, plus a given number of units or leaders in adjacent linked hexes to move and/or battle. Units in adjacent linked hexes may be in different sections of the battlefield as long as each ordered unit is adjacent to at least one other ordered unit, and at least one of the ordered units is adjacent to the designated leader. In this way, a leadership order enables you to chain units to move and/or battle in a coordinated fashion. Just be aware though, once a leadership order is issued, that leader may not detach from a unit. During this phase, players may also spend honor and fortune tokens to play dragon cards. The cost to play a dragon card is shown in the upper left-hand corner. Many of these dragon cards can be played alongside the turn's command card. And by carefully managing honor and fortune tokens, players can enhance their strategy with these powerful cards. In this phase, players may take the units and leaders they issued orders to and move them. Unit movements are made sequentially. One ordered unit moves at a time, in the sequence of the player's choice. The player must complete one unit's movement before beginning another. In addition, the player must complete all unit movements before proceeding to battle. A unit class's color is a visual indicator of its maximum movement range. Light class foot units, represented by a green circle, typically have a movement range of 2 hex spaces. Medium class units, represented by a blue triangle, are a little more complicated. A medium unit may move 1 hex space and still battle, or 2 hex spaces and not battle. Heavy class units have a red square. Foot units may move 1 hex space, and mounted units 2 hex spaces. Finally, leaders may move up to 3 hex spaces. When attached to a unit, they move with that unit at the lower rate. Leaders are also unique because they can move through friendly units' hex spaces to reposition themselves amongst the army. Finally, army commanders and their bodyguards have no movement. Typically, at the beginning of a scenario, they're placed in a command tent and remain there throughout. Another key factor in movement is the ability to conduct combat afterwards. Most units can take full advantage of their movement range. However, there are some restrictions. I've created this diagram to illustrate each unit and leader's range and combat eligibility. Also remember that leaders are individuals, not units. They cannot participate in combat unless they're attached to a unit. Next, let's take a brief look at the terrain that players will encounter in the first scenario. Let's discuss forest terrain. For movement, all units and leaders must stop when entering a forest hex and may move no further on that turn. However, a unit that moves onto a forest terrain hex may still battle this turn. All close combat involving a forest hex, whether attacking into or defending from, will roll a maximum of 2 battle dice. A unit attacking into a forest hex with ranged combat will roll a maximum of 1 die. However, a command card that adds additional dice in battle will modify both of these maximums. Finally, a forest hex blocks line of sight. Next, let's discuss terrain hexes with hills. With hills, there are no movement restrictions. When units attack into a hill hex with close combat, They are attacking uphill and roll a maximum of 2 battle dice. When battling an enemy unit that is downhill, all units roll a maximum of 3 battle dice. Finally, a hill hex blocks line of sight to units behind it. A unit on a lower level has line of sight onto the first hill hex and vice versa. However, a unit on a lower level does not have line of sight through one hill hex onto a second hill hex with a unit and vice versa. In other words, a unit at a lower level is not able to see or be seen if at least one other hill hex is between the two units. Line of sight is not blocked between units that are both on hills because they are at the same level. In Commands and Colors Samurai Battles, many units have 2 options for combat. All units can conduct close combat. Close combat may occur when opposing units are in hex spaces adjacent to each other. Also in close combat, some units may be eligible for special maneuvers. Attackers that successfully eliminate all of the defender's blocks may use the momentum of their attack to advance into their opponent's hex. After gaining ground, these units may battle again in close combat with an adjacent enemy unit. Defending units that survive an attack may battle back against their attacker. Units equipped with projectile weapons may also engage in ranged combat. Ranged combat may occur when an enemy unit is within the projectile's reach and the attacker has a clear line of sight to the target. In later scenarios, terrain hexes such as woods, hills, and buildings may block an attacker's line of sight and prohibit ranged combat. Now that we've seen the 2 types of combat, let's take a look at the gameplay mechanics behind these concepts. All battles are resolved with custom 6-sided dice. Each side of these battle dice depict a colored symbol that indicate a specific outcome to the conflict. Symbols are interpreted in different ways depending on whether the battle is ranged or close combat. Regardless of the battle type, if a player rolls the colored symbol of the enemy unit, they score a hit and a block is removed. If a unit is skilled in close combat, then the crossed sword symbol will score a hit on the enemy unit regardless of color type. Obviously, close combat doesn't occur in ranged combat battles. If this die result is thrown in ranged combat, it is considered to be a miss. The next symbol is for honor and fortune. For each honor and fortune symbol rolled in close combat, the attacker collects 1 honor and fortune token with the following exceptions. When a player unit was inspired and rolls the additional 1 dice in close combat, collect 1 less honor and fortune token than the number of honor and fortune symbols rolled. When any samurai cavalry unit engages in close combat against a lower rank unit, blue triangle or green circle, do not collect any honor and fortune tokens even if honor and fortune symbols were rolled. And finally, when attacking a levy irregular infantry, no attacking unit will collect any honor and fortune tokens when honor and fortune symbols are rolled. For ranged combat, only bow units will collect 1 honor and fortune token for each honor and fortune symbol rolled. Finally, if a flag die result is rolled, the enemy unit may retreat. Unit type and terrain conditions may impact this outcome. If successful, a unit will retreat a number of hexes back toward their side of the board based on their unit type. For Commands and Colors Samurai Battles, retreats also come with a penalty. To the Samurai Code, retreat is dishonorable and therefore will cost the player honor and fortune tokens. The specific penalty is determined by unit type and shown on the reference card under the retreat section. Commands and Colors Samurai Battles has additional rules for sword hits, superior rank, and stature. With superior rank, a unit with a higher rank will ignore 1 sword hit for each rank lower than them. This rule spans both foot and mounted units. For example, because of superior rank, a unit with a square symbol will ignore 1 sword roll against it when attacked in close combat by a unit with a triangle. Also, because of superior rank, a unit with a square symbol will ignore 2 sword hits rolled against it when attacked in close combat by a unit with a green circle, and so on. With superior stature, a cavalry unit will ignore 1 sword rolled against it when attacked in close combat by an infantry unit. Now, let's talk about the game mechanics behind close combat. The close combat procedure is 8 short steps. In step 1, the player announces close combat. To be eligible for close combat, the active player must either maneuver their ordered units adjacent to an enemy unit's hex, or have ordered units that are already adjacent to them. The key word here is ordered. Units may already be adjacent to an enemy unit, but without an order from a command card, they cannot engage in combat. Another key note, if a unit is adjacent to an enemy unit, they cannot use ranged combat against that unit or another enemy unit farther away. Once in close proximity to an enemy, they're focused on that enemy and are poised for close combat. Therefore, to use ranged combat, a unit must be clear of adjacent enemy units on all hex sides. In the second step, the player determines the terrain battle dice maximum. The terrain in which the target unit is on, and in some instances the attacking unit battles from, may impact, usually reducing, the number of battle dice rolled in close combat. Therefore, adjust the number of battle dice rolled for terrain. After that, the player needs to determine for inspired leader, command card, and dragon card adjustments. After terrain effects are applied, adjust the number of battle dice based on any special abilities, command card modifier, dragon card modifier, and inspired leader close combat modifier that may be in effect. We will talk more about leader abilities in a later episode of this series. Next, the attacker rolls the battle dice, and then applies any hits. Once all hits have been applied and any blocks removed, then any retreats that were rolled are applied. And in Commands and Colors Samurai Battles, retreats cost honor and fortune tokens because they're seen as dishonorable. The amount to pay for a retreat can be found in the retreat column on the player reference card. The last 2 steps of the procedure are contingent on the dice results. If the die results eliminated all defenders' blocks, or they were forced to retreat, then the attacker may momentum advance into the defender's vacated hex space, and potentially be eligible for bonus close combat. The attacker is eligible for bonus close combat if the defender was completely eliminated in the attack. If the defender was not eliminated and did not retreat, then step 8 comes into play. The defender may then battle back against the attacker. Following the same combat rules, the defender rolls the battle dice and applies the results to the attacker. And with that, close combat is completed. A unit with projectile weapons battling an enemy unit more than 1 hex away is said to be conducting range combat, also known as firing at a targeted enemy. Range combat may not be used against an adjacent enemy unit. Also, as we discussed before, a unit with range combat capabilities may not fire on another more distant enemy unit if an enemy unit is adjacent to them. If that unit chooses to battle, they must resolve close combat with the adjacent enemy unit. Much like close combat, range combat follows a procedure of 8 steps. In the first step, the attacking player announces the firing unit and the enemy unit it wishes to target. Next, players verify that the target is within range. When counting the range in hexes, include the targeted unit's hex, but not the firing unit's hex. Then, players check for line of sight. The attacking unit must be able to see the enemy unit it wants to fire at. This is known as having line of sight. Line of sight is verified by drawing a line from the center of the hex containing the firing unit to the center of the hex containing the targeted unit. Line of sight is blocked only if a hex or part of a hex between the battling unit and the target hex contains an obstruction. Obstructions include other units or leaders, regardless if it's a friend or foe, as well as the terrain types shown on the screen. Next, determine terrain battle dice maximum. The terrain in which the target unit is on, and in some instances, the attacking unit battles from, may impact, usually reducing, the number of battle dice rolled in combat. Adjust the number of battle dice rolled for terrain. After that, the player will determine command card and dragon card dice adjustments. After terrain effects are applied, adjust the number of battle dice based on any unit's special abilities, command card modifiers, and dragon card modifiers. The attacker will resolve the battle by rolling the required battle dice. The number of dice to be rolled depends on whether or not the unit held its position, or in other words, it did not move before firing. Once the die are rolled, score any hits on enemy units. For each hit scored, one block is removed from the target unit. When the last block of an opponent's unit is removed, the player collects a victory banner. And finally, apply retreats. After all hits have been resolved, casualties removed, and leader casualty checks made, retreats are then applied. Remember though, in Commands and Colors Samurai battles, retreats must be paid for with honor and fortune tokens. The cost for each unit is displayed in the retreat column on the player reference card. Now, when a player does not have enough honor and fortune tokens in his reserve to cover the loss of honor due to a unit's retreat, or caused by the action of a dragon card, the player must lose what honor and fortune tokens he has in his reserve pool and must make a lack of honor roll. The lack of honor roll is equal to 4 dice plus 1 additional die for each honor and fortune token that could not be paid. For each symbol rolled that matches the symbol on the retreating unit, eliminate 1 block from that unit. When the last block in the unit is removed, the opposing player collects a victory banner. After that, each symbol rolled that does not match the retreating unit will cause 1 block loss to the nearest unit in the army with a matching symbol. The controlling player will choose which unit will lose blocks. And once again, should the last block in a unit be removed, the opposing player collects a victory banner. One last note, a sword, flag, or an honor and fortune symbol rolled during a lack of honor roll will not have any effect. Before we move on to discuss leaders, let's discuss a unique unit in this game, the LEVY, or Peasant Infantry. These are peasants that have been pressed into military service by their feudal lord. They're often poorly equipped and have no real military training, but they make up for this with their ability to swarm. When 2 or more ordered levy units are adjacent to the same enemy unit and close combat that unit, all the levy units in the swarm may combine their attacks and roll their dice at the same time. Keep these rules in mind when the levy infantry appear in later scenarios. In this section, we're going to discuss how leaders can affect and be affected by combat. Let's begin with a leader's ability to inspire a unit. Although a leader may not battle, a leader may still impact a unit's close combat by inspiring a unit. A player may choose to spend 1 honor and fortune token to have a leader inspire a unit. A leader-inspired unit will then add 1 die to their close combat dice roll. The honor and fortune token spent is then returned to the common pool. An infantry leader must be in the same hex as the unit he is going to inspire, but a cavalry leader can inspire a unit in his hex and may also inspire friendly units in adjacent hexes. Some notes to remember when inspiring units. A maximum of 1 honor and fortune token may be spent to inspire a unit during a close combat. Cavalry leaders do not have to be ordered to inspire an adjacent unit, and an inspired unit collects 1 less honor and fortune token when the symbol is rolled. Keep these rules in mind when inspiring units. Whenever a leader is directly involved in combat, there is a chance that they may become a casualty. Therefore, whenever a leader is attached to a unit that suffers a hit and loses a block, but the unit itself is not eliminated, a leader must make a casualty check. To conduct a casualty check for ranged combat, 2 dice are rolled, and if the die result shows swords on both, the leader is eliminated, and the attacking player collects a victory banner. For close combat, 1 die is rolled, and if the die shows a sword result, then the leader is eliminated. In this instance, the attacker also collects a victory banner. Now, when a leader is attached to a unit that suffers a hit and loses its last block, and thus the unit is eliminated from either ranged or close combat, roll 1 die, and if it shows a sword result, the leader is also eliminated. After the leader casualty check is passed, the leader must retreat 1, 2, or 3 hexes in close combat or commit seppuku. This is ritual suicide, which we will talk about in just a moment. When a leader is alone in a hex and is attacked via close or range combat, the attacker rolls the normal number of dice. A sword die result will eliminate the leader. Once eliminated, the attacker will then collect a victory banner. If the lone leader is attacked in close combat, they must then retreat or commit seppuku if retreat is not possible. If this was close combat, then the attacker would then be able to gain ground. Now, let's discuss seppuku. Instead of retreating, the controlling player may choose to have a lone leader commit seppuku, honorable suicide, even if that leader has a clear path for retreat. When a leader commits seppuku, the owning player removes the leader block from the battlefield and gains 5 honor and fortune tokens. But that player must also lose 1 command card from their hand, selected at random by the opponent. The selected command card is then discarded. The loss of this card reduces the owning player's command by 1. Therefore, if they begin the game with 5 cards and one of their leaders commits seppuku, they would then have a maximum of 4 cards. In this event, the player's opponent does not collect a victory banner, but they do gain 1 dragon card. After completing all movement, battles, and retreats, the active player discards their command card and draws another card from the deck. If the draw deck runs out of cards, shuffle the discards to form a new draw deck. Then the player has a choice. They may draw 1 dragon card or gain 2 honor and fortune tokens. In addition, if the active player did not play a dragon card during his turn, 1 dragon card may be discarded from his hand and 1 honor and fortune token can be collected instead. Be aware though, a dragon card drawn at the end of the player's turn cannot be discarded in the turn it was drawn. Once the active player's command card is drawn and a dragon card or honor and fortune is replenished, the active player's turn is over. And now, their opponent gets to go through their turn. Following the same process as before, players will continue to alternate back and forth until the scenario's victory conditions are met. And, with everything we've covered in this episode, you should be ready to play the first scenario on your own. If you found this video helpful, please give me a like and share with your friends. To be the first notified when the next episode of Harsh Rules becomes available, please hit the bell icon for notifications. And as always, this has been Harsh for Harsh Rules. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.